Nancy Pelosi, at the tender age of 83, has decided it's not time to withdraw from public service. Number one, she has more to give.
Okay, can there be anything slimier than this woman?
Yes.
Okay, help me.
We'll start there, and we'll go in increasing degrees of sliminess. Nancy Pelosi also owes it to her constituents, right? She's like Judge Schmales. She didn't want to send young men to the gas chamber, but he felt he owed it to them. That's the same thing here.
And the needs that our city has right now really call for me to stay another term. I had the privilege of representing San Francisco for a long time. And they have given me the latitude to serve as speaker, as leader for over 20 years, and whip as well. Visit 87 countries, served 30 years on the Intelligence Committee, all of those things. But at the same time, being central to my service was representing my district. In gratitude to them for that, I have agreed to stay on another term.
She's agreed to stay on another term.
So
is there going to be an election, or is it just agreement between her and these unnamed constituents?
She's just nodding her head. She's moving on.
I'm staying on. Okay. Oh.
All right. So there's no penalty for screwing up your entire congressional district, like a city like San Francisco, destroying it. It's just like Tony Preckwinkle and Kim Foxx aren't suffering anything from what they've done.
We need them.
Right.
San Francisco needs Nancy Pelosi. No. And California needs Gavin Newsom.
Of course.
Which is why he is not running for president. Stop postulating that he is, for gosh sakes.
Filing deadlines haven't passed. President Biden doesn't run. Why shouldn't we consider you a likely candidate?
I think the vice president is naturally the one lined up, and the filing deadlines are quickly coming to pass. And I think we need to move past this notion that he's not going to run. President Biden is going to run, and looking forward to getting him reelected. I think there's been so much wallowing in the last few months and hand-wringing in this respect.
Speaking of wallowing.
But we're gearing up for the campaign. We're looking forward to it.
But you hear these calls privately. What do you tell these donors who are wallowing in this?
Time to move on. Let's go.
And am I supposed to interpret that comment about the vice president, that if for some reason the president chose not to run at this point,
well, that's
everybody rallies around her?
It's the Biden-Harris administration. Maybe I'm a little old-fashioned.
Yeah,
maybe I'm a little old-fashioned about presidents and vice presidents. I was a lieutenant governor, so I'm a little subjective.
Yeah.
Oh, you stop.
Just go have a burger at the French Laundry. That's all.
Yeah. So Gavin Newsom's not running for president. I keep telling people I think it's more likely than not that Biden's going to be the nominee. And of course, Gavin Newsom wants Biden or Harris because
he doesn't have the guts to remove.
Well, also too, it's like.
Democratic Party doesn't have the guts.
It's in his interest to see one of them lose so he can run in 4 years.
Yeah.
Especially Harris, if Biden were to bow out. For more, by the way, just in case you didn't catch it, we did go from slimy to slimier to slimiest. Slimy, Nancy Pelosi. Slimier, Gavin Newsom. Slimiest, Chuck Todd, that yapping little terrier who asked Gavin Newsom that question.
With the Julius Caesar haircut. I love that. You're a bald man. Admit it, okay? Combing your hair forward. What a loser.
For more on octogenarians and oligarchs, please be joined by Steve Cortes, advisor for the pro-Ron DeSantis PAC, Never Back Down. He writes at stevecortes.substack. That's his Substack, Steve Cortes, his name. Steve, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning, John and Dan. Appreciate it.
So these octogenarians, Tucker Carlson was on with Portnoy. He interviewed him last week, and they both agreed that neither Trump nor Biden should be running. They're too old, and even though Trump's just still a septuagenarian, it's people in their 70s and 80s, the Nancy Pelosi's, the Donald Trumps, the Joe Bidens, the Chuck Grassley's, the Dianne Feinsteins, the Mitch McConnells, they all need to go away. What's your view?
Right. That is certainly my view. I think it is long past time that there is an age limit on political service. And look, I'd love term limits as well, but that's clearly never going to happen with exit, except for perhaps a constitutional convention or convention of the states. But the members of Congress are never going to limit themselves. I think it is possible, though, with the right leadership, particularly from the White House, if we elect the right president in 2024, that they would be willing to establish an age limit, in part for self-interest, because they would like leadership positions both over the houses and as a whole and of the committees, and so they might be willing to punt some of those elderly folks. But what prompted me to write this article, Octogenarians and Oligarchs, is watching Mitch McConnell, who has now frozen up completely 2 times in front of
He's
cameras
fine.
in just recent weeks.
He's fine. He says he's fine.
He's fine, according to Republican senators, right?
Yes, he's fine.
Just fine. Who knows what's going on off camera, right? And by the way, I'm not blaming him or making fun of him for his medical condition. Clearly he cannot control. It's clear he can't control what's going on. And I realize that there are people in their 80s who function extremely well, right? But those are the exceptions that prove the rule. Generally, people in their 80s, if they haven't already started to experience cognitive decline, it is a risk that can happen in a nanosecond for anybody of those ages. And I believe, looking at the landscape of America, how many decisions are being made for us by people like Joe Biden, Mitch McConnell, George Soros, Nancy Pelosi, people who all of whom I just named are 80 years plus, do not have our best interests at heart, and moreover, in many cases, are clearly cognitively impaired. I think we have to be grown-ups and take a look at this situation and say, for our country, this does not make sense.
All right, Steve, you just made the list. You just made the list. You just stepped into it. Donald Trump, age 77, is challenging everybody and anybody. He's challenging Rupert Murdoch, his kids, all his ex-wives, to take mental acuity tests. He tweeted out that a few years ago, I was the only one to agree to acuity tests, and I aced it. The Wall Street Journal, Biden, all the Bidens, all the Murdochs, Steve Cortes, challenged them all to acuity tests. Also, he wants to make it sort of a biathlon. We can also throw in some physical activity. I just won the senior club championship at a big golf club with many very good players. To do so, you need strength, accuracy, touch, and above all, mental toughness. Ask Brett Baer, a very good golfer. All right, so all comers, Steve, including you. So the only way you get Trump out of the race is you beat him on a mental acuity test.
Short swords in the arena. That's what I say.
Yes,
Steve?
listen. Clearly Donald Trump does not seem his age. Okay, and I say this as somebody who is right now campaigning against him in the primary on behalf of Ron DeSantis, who is, in my view, the most vibrant 44-year-old young leader in America. But looking at Donald Trump, I'll be the first to concede somebody who I worked for many years, advocated fiercely on his behalf. He does not seem his age. But even for him, again, I would make the point that if he were elected, he would end up being president of the United States into his 80s. And I think that is a risky proposition for the country, even if he now seems to be fine. And clearly, the current occupant of the Oval Office is not fine. The current Senate Minority Leader, is clearly not fine. Dianne Feinstein, we're talking about Nancy Pelosi. What about her colleague, her radical dinosaur colleague from the Bay, Dianne Feinstein, who is 90 years old? I mean, Nancy Pelosi seems like a spring chicken compared to Feinstein, who is clearly not just impaired, but catatonic.
Yeah, her daughter has power of attorney over her now. I mean, it's remarkable.
Yeah, and yet she represents 39 million Californians. I mean, are they being properly represented? And so, again, I think that term limits would be wonderful, but let's be honest, it's just not happening. I think an age limit is possible politically, and I think given the fact that our country, sadly, is increasingly being ruled by dinosaurs who are not just radical in their politics, but also impaired in their abilities, in their physical and mental abilities. I believe that this should be a priority for the next president, and I think it's actually achievable.
I like that two rival wings of the Republican Party, the DeSantis wing and the Nikki Haley wing, can come to an agreement on this, because she also supports this idea, as you know. But I need to ask you something about her. I'm a little concerned, since this is 9/11, and I supported the war in Iraq and President Bush and all that when that was going on, only to be disabused by a sergeant of Marines who said, "Mr. Cass, can we have coffee?" And then he came by and told me about the 5 tours he had and how the whole thing was BS from the beginning and we should never have been in Iraq.
Right.
I think about Nikki Haley being lionized by Fox News, being lionized by the editors at the National Review as the reasonable, safe responsible Republican, Nikki Haley. They love her. And I wonder what you think of it in terms of 9/11 and the lessons that we learned about the neocons and our young people who were and the blood and the treasure that we lost.
Sure, John. I'm glad you bring this up, and it is appropriate that we talk about it, on this solemn day, right? Because instead of going and smashing the Taliban and then leaving Afghanistan or leaving shortly after, we ended up mired in a 2-decade conflict there that did not serve American interests, that we exited with tremendous dishonor and tragedy. And in addition, we started an incredibly needless war in Iraq that was frankly irrelevant to the causes of this day. 9/11. And so it's important that we assess current politicians, Nikki Haley included, who I believe is a card-carrying member of the Washington war machine. She is in favor of intervention and escalation all over the world, including in Ukraine. And if you look at her biography, the little Chicago tie-in here, she was on the board of directors of Boeing, major defense contractor. So she is in every way, both in terms of her agenda as well as her record and experience. She is somebody who believes in funding the messes of intervention and war making that have unfortunately dominated Washington and the Washington establishment, Republican and Democrat, for the last 2 decades. And our movement of patriotic populism is the exact opposite of that approach. Insists on an American foreign policy of realism and restraint. This current escalation in Ukraine, which is not just supported by Biden, but also by most Republicans on Capitol Hill, is to me one of the riskiest ventures in probably since invading Iraq in terms of American security, and perhaps even more risky in some ways because we're countering, of course, the largest nuclear power on Earth in terms of number of missiles, right, which is Russia. And over a regional conflict, a regional ethnic conflict, 6,000 miles away that involves, in my view, no American interest. Nikki Haley, to me, is disqualified on that issue alone. She is a warmonger. She's part of the Washington war machine. She believes in a continuation of the failed policies of the foreign policy establishment of Washington, D.C. And for that reason, I think she represents an old and thankfully discarded wing of the Republican Party as far as the electorate goes, at least.
Trump and DeSantis were both in Ames for the Iowa State game. Trump was flipping burgers. I don't know if this report is true, but apparently he only had 5 buns and 2 burger patties, and yet he fed a crowd of 5,000. Is that true?
Good one, Dan.
So here's the real question. So if DeSantis does not win Iowa, is he done?
No, I don't think so. Listen, Ron DeSantis has the support, the capital, to continue running in this race for some time. Obviously, we intend on winning Iowa, and that is task number 1. Task number 2 is to win New Hampshire. But I do not believe that if he fails in task 1, it means that the entire race is over. You mentioned earlier about dissatisfaction with a Trump-Biden rematch. On most polling, roughly 2/3 of Americans, as much even into the 70s percentages, do not want that rematch. It is a rematch that nobody wants, and yet it seems at this moment to be inevitable. Well, the answer to that, the antidote, the solution to preventing that rematch and to not having 2 incredibly disliked 80-year-olds or close to 80-year-olds running against each other, the answer is Ron DeSantis, is the most vibrant, young, dynamic, conservative governor in all of America. So
I don't know.
We intend to win Iowa. But
how do you get that message? How do you get that message through with when they're loving when Fox News and the National Review are leading the charge to love Nikki Haley, love her, love her, love her, love her up, love her up.
Look, we didn't want Rocky 5, but we got it. I'm just saying, you may not want the rematch, but you're gonna. I
didn't want Godfather 3 either, but we got it.
No, I mean, to John's points, I mean, DeSantis is now not like a clear and away second place candidate right now. He's fighting for second place, and then whoever's there, if they can establish some separation, then they've got 20, 30, 40 points to go to get to Trump.
Yeah. Listen, I'll be the first to say we have work to do, clearly. And this is an unusual, really unprecedented, in my view, situation where both, the corporate media, the liberal media is incredibly anti-DeSantis because they've seen how effective he is in Florida. And they know that, unlike Trump, it won't just be bluster. He will actually implement the policies he's talking about as president of the United States. So they fear him. But at the same time, he is largely the enemy of the establishment conservative media who wants Trump, because they need him for clicks, because they fear his wrath if they cross him. So it's an interesting situation and a tough one, frankly, for Ron DeSantis, where he is fighting against not just the liberal press, but against the conservative media as well. And so given that, it's a challenge for us to get our message out, but we are. And again, we have the resources to do so. We have the candidate to do so, somebody who, again, reflecting on 9/11, he's the only veteran in the race, in the entire race, somebody who was motivated by 9/11 itself to take his Harvard Law degree, not to Wall Street or to a fancy New York law firm to make a lot of money, but instead to the United States Navy to serve and to get deployed with the SEALs to Iraq. So I think he's got an incredible story to tell. We do have the resources to tell it, and we're going to continue to work. We're going to earn it. We're going to continue to show up at every debate, respect the voters of Iowa and every state, and earn this thing. But that doesn't mean it will be an easy road. No.
Steve Cortes, advisor to the pro Ron DeSantis PAC, never back down. He writes at Steve Cortes. That's with an S, stevecortes.substack. Steve, thanks as always.
You bet. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And
he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper, hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hi, I'm Martha Stewart. Every year, more than 4 million pets enter shelters here in the United States. My friends at American Humane have been helping animals since 1877. The goal is to ensure that pets have a safe shelter, especially during natural disasters. Adopting a shelter pet allows shelters to help more animals awaiting care. Please consider adopting today and take some time to learn more about American Humane's other work at americanhumane.org.
How far will the left go to win 2024? Will they send out more stimulus checks or give away trillions more to left-wing groups? The simple truth is they